First of all, good evening, everybody. And it's a great, great pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot, Madam Ambassador. And, well, what a story you have. What a story. And first of all, congratulations on behalf of the Center for American Studies, which I represent here, and Paolo. He was my former director of our board. I would like to start just asking about your choice, because being a journalist, and we all are journalists here, almost, is not just doing something for money. It's a passion of life. It's my passion of life, and I suppose yours. So how did you start?
So I think I fell into journalism backwards, which I actually find more reporters do than not. At least my friends do. Maybe it speaks to who I'm friends with, but I wanted to be a doctor in college, and I came back to DC. My parents are here. They lived in the DC area growing up. Yeah, they're somewhere around here. Oh, hey, there's my mom. There's my mom. There's my dad. And I came back to DC because I didn't have any money and I couldn't afford to stay in Ann Arbor for the summer. And I got I was working at a bar, in a restaurant, and I got an internship working at Meet the Press with Tim Russert, just because I felt like I needed to do something that was sort of official or worky. And I fell in love with it. But it's funny, I fell in love with the production side of TV, not so much the reporting side or the editorial piece. I loved working in the control room. I thought it was so exciting. I loved working in the editing room. And for some reason that I'll still never understand to this day, Tim Russert kind of took me under his wing and hired me on before I even graduated from college. And so I went on, I worked on the assignment desk for a little bit with Tony Capra over there. He was my assignment manager. Yes! And then I went up and worked for Tim Russert for 5 years up at Meet the Press. So I covered politics for a while working for Tim, and I loved it. But that was through the election in 2004. And afterwards, I went to Tim and said, I think if I have to cover politics for one more minute, I'm going to hate it, because I've stopped liking it. And he said, well, give me some time, let me think about what you want to do. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, anything but the Pentagon. I don't want to go to the Pentagon. And a couple weeks later, he called me and said, hey kiddo, start studying, you're going to the Pentagon. And I said, why? And he said, well, you're my little social butterfly, and I think you're perfect for the Pentagon. Secretary Rumsfeld was there at the time, and I remember the last thing he said before I hung up was, go get Rummy, and he hung up. And I guess it's all been sort of down
Started
there.
like this.
Yeah.
So I must confess, and I realized just tonight that we have something in common, that is NBC. Because I was an intern in NBC in the early 80s, because I was a stringer from Genova. I was covering Achille Lauro's story, and then NBC invited me in New York, so I was for 1 month and a half working with a wonderful woman. Her name was Velma Cato. I don't know if anybody have remembered her. And so this is the first link. The second one is I'm working for Sky, and Sky is owned by Comcast. Yeah. So I didn't realize before, just tonight. Listen.
All roads lead back to NBC and journalism.
I mean, working as correspondent, as you, and we have seen that beautiful story about you, will make you facing a lot of challenges. Can you tell us a few moments that were particularly hard?
I really genuinely, I mean it when I say I feel very fortunate for what I do. Some of the things that are harder, I think, are more of the more emotional stories that any human being would have a hard time with. So I think back to when the Syrian civilians were gassed, and we saw those videos and photos of the little kids who were gasping for air. I think back to covering the conflict in Aleppo when civilians were just being killed left and right and people were suffering. So the stories that I have a really difficult time with, but I also find in a strange way the most rewarding are the ones where you really see genuine and you feel the human suffering involved. And I will say in national security, unfortunately, because we cover conflict, there are a lot of those. The one thing I will say is we have a wonderful press corps, and I have wonderful colleagues, many of them here tonight, who understand that, and you have the ability to lean on them. And I think that that's so important when you're covering these difficult stories. Which again, Ukraine is another example. We're seeing so many people, innocent people suffering, and you're human, and it's hard to watch.
So we heard that you don't have only a special job, but also a special family with 5 kids. Anyway.
5 boys.
3 little and 2 teenager, older. Okay. I know that this is a question that we ask to women and we never ask to men. I didn't remember one time I asked to a politician or a journalist, how do you reconcile your family and your job? We still have this question in our lives. So I'm asking you, how do you do with family and job?
A lot of support, like my parents and my husband, and you have to sort of, you have to rely on a lot of help and a lot of support. There's a lot of caffeine involved in my day, every single day, a lot of caffeine involved in my day. But this is another area where I feel very fortunate. It's a place where, someone like, like Martha Raddatz, who's forged all of these paths for women with her stepchildren, and I'm lucky. I grew up in a different age where it was acceptable for women to cover conflict and to cover these national security issues. I will say, when I started at the Pentagon in 2005, there was only one other woman in the press corps, and it was Barbara Starr. And now we have about a third to half of the press corps are women. And I remember in the first couple of weeks that I was there, I got called little lady, young lady, honey, sweetie, all these things. That doesn't happen anymore. And it's because of people. I don't feel like I'm one of the people who had to forge that path. It was women who came before me who did that. And I also feel I'm very fortunate to have so much support at NBC. So at times when, our kids are a handful, right? It's a bunch of boys. They're a handful. There's just the house is a mess and it's loud. It's so loud all the time. And when you really feel like you're about to lose it, you can go to your bosses, you can go to your colleagues and say, I just need a minute. And there's a lot of support for that. And I really do feel for women who I think 15, 20 years ago probably couldn't do that. They couldn't say when they just needed a minute to feel sane.
Yes.
I take that a lot, by the way. Yes. I take a lot of minutes to feel sane.
This is true. In any case, there is a special place for husband.
Yes.
Especially when they have a wife who's correspondent who travel a lot. So there is a special place for husbands, and I think we can all give a special applause to the husband. I know what I'm saying. I know. Ask to my husbands. So, in journalism, everything has changed in the last 30 years. Partly because of the web, of course, but also I think because of the all news 24 hours, all news. And I would like to have your opinion in order to get the good and the bad of this change. What's good and what's bad in your opinion?
So I think the obvious difficult part about having so many different platforms is bad information gets out there and it proliferates much faster. especially with social media platforms. But there is a good piece to that, and it's something that, you know, we in television, and I mean, not even just the last 30 years, so the time I've been at NBC, our platforms have expanded so much just since I've been there. So for instance, you know, when I started at NBC, if you had a really good story that you just knew had to get on the show, well, if Nightly and Today Show didn't necessarily buy it, you had MSNBC, maybe they would buy it, but now I also have our streaming services. We have Peacock, we have our website, which does tremendous work, and they have so much original reporting and breaking news. You know, not that we would ever, you know, beat people like the New York Times or anything like that, or the Washington Post. I'm just kidding, guys. We don't have to beat you. We have so many different platforms, and that is what is so, that's what's great about the additional content. But again, it comes with its challenges. I'm actually very proud to be a part of the quote-unquote mainstream media. We have extremely high standards for our reporting, and we have a lot of different outlets for our work, but it's an area where I know viewers and readers and even listeners, when you're talking about podcasts, can come and they can be confident in what they are hearing and seeing and reading is accurate, and it's good, hard, well-reported work.
Don't you think that, I'm talking about the Italian journalism, I don't know if it's the same here in the United States, but I know many young colleagues who are really badly paid, who works from morning to night, and literally don't have a minute to check the news, because there is this big problem. Journalists is now copying what the web has already informed and write on a new way. So don't you think that we all need to think of the future of journalism and decide that if we want journalism, a quality journalism, and how a quality journalism can resist?
I think that journalism in general just requires a lot of commitment. It's just, you know, when you're talking about not necessarily good pay to go, and I mean, think about some of the people who go and they cover education board meetings, and they cover, you know, very local community issues. Well, thank God for them. I mean, thank God for those people who are still covering those things. And you know, fortunately, they have more platforms. They can write on the web. They can even write on social media. And I think it takes a lot of commitment. It's not just that. There's commitment to people who are covering conflict. You know, we were talking about early on in when the U.S. was bombing Iraq and his colleagues refused to leave the Al Rashid Hotel. Well, imagine that. And we see journalists doing things like that every single day. It's not because of the pay. They do it. They do it because of the commitment and the desire and the responsibility that comes with telling the world a story. So something like, again, like you know, conflict areas. Most people in the world can't get there. They're never going to see that for themselves. So they rely on the eyes and the ears of the reporters who are there, often putting themselves in jeopardy, taking themselves away from their family. But they rely on them because that's the only way the story gets out. And thank goodness for them. Thank goodness for the people all the way from those community education boards meetings all the way to the front lines in Ukraine right now.
My last question, and then if you have, feel free. My last question is, you will have, as everybody has a dream in your job. And what's yours?
My dream?
Yes.
Oh, well, right now it's just sleep, because I have kids and I work and everything. It's like I dream of sleeping, and I do dream. And right now one of my big dreams is going to Urbino for a couple of days and then getting away from my kids and work for a few days. I mean, I think when I first got into journalism, I never imagined I would be sitting in a place like this where people were recognizing my work for what I did. I never got into it for accolades, and I didn't expect accolades. So I mean, in some ways, I'm sort of living my dream, because my reality is much better than I ever would have expected it to be. Being a reporter, being a journalist, But I would take a little more sleep if I could. If I could get the sleep, I would do that too, so. Maybe a day off here and there.
You know what? You can sleep when you will be out of Germany.
When I retire, one day when I retire.